So the overarching cultural shape that this takes is what Dewey calls the business mind, and it shapes the very way that we value almost everything. He writes, our prevailing mentality, our ideology, is said to be that of the business mind, which has become so deplorably pervasive. Are not the prevailing standards of value those derived from pecuniary success and economic prosperity? So the signs of this disintegration are all around us. They're in the insecurity that people feel in their economic lives. And Dewey writes, the most marked trait of present life, economically speaking, is insecurity. It's tragic that millions of men, desirous of working, should be recurrently out of employment. Aside from cyclical depressions, there is a standing army at all times who have no regular work. Fear of loss of work, dread of oncoming of old age, create anxiety and eat into self-respect in a way that impairs personal dignity. Where fears abound, courageous and robust individuality are undermined. The vast development of technological resources that might bring security in its train has actually brought a new mode of insecurity as mechanization displaces labor. So, does any of this sound familiar? Almost a century after Dewey wrote it? Technology, mechanization, corporate mergers, right? Insecurity about old age. It sounds familiar. So, Dewey was aware of many of the false solutions that people tend to seek to these kinds of problems. There is, on the one hand, empty finger wagging about personal responsibility, the character issue. There is a proliferation of business degrees as a hedge against insecurity, right? Pre-professionalism. There is the wish for a miracle solution, right? That one might marry a millionaire, or one might win the lottery, or one might invent a best-selling product or app, I guess, for us. And sometimes the best solution that people look for is not even a solution at all, but just distraction from these seemingly dire prognostications about their future. Right? They might just be addicted to sports or entertainment. They might take mood medication, SSRIs, relaxants, right, alcohol. They might go new age with it. They might be into meditation and wellness and mindfulness. Now all of those things, right, have their place, but Dewey saw them often being used as bombs or salves to what is inherently a systemic political and economic arrangement, right? It's a problem that is systemic that needs to be changed. So a major problem then for Dewey, that Dewey sees, is that businesses plan for prosperity, but only of the economic kind. Healthcare, schooling, literacy, plans regarding pollution and environmental degradation, poverty, homelessness, war, discrimination, right? These are not part of the business plan. Right? So again, the point here is that there's an arbitrary split. There's a split between the public and the private spheres of life. There's a split between the individual and community. So as Dewey puts it, the growth of corporateness is arbitrarily restrictive. Hence it operates to limit individuality, to put burdens on it, to confuse and submerge it. It crowds more out than it incorporates in an ordered and secure life. It has made rural districts stagnant while bringing excess and restless movement to the city. So while society still has forms of association, of course, prompted by economic life, right? People are at workplaces and right, they have co-workers and so they have associated relationships. These are not organic. They don't marry all of our objectives with our work. And he puts it, As he puts it, men are brought together on one side by investment in the same joint stock company, and on the other by the fact that the machine compels mass production in order that investors may get their profits. The results affect all society, as the ultimate human motives that operate are private and egoistic. An economic individualism of motives and aims underlies our present corporate mechanisms and undoes the individual. Meanwhile, in the realm of politics, there is a lack of solutions there too. Right? Instead of cooperative inquiry or public problem solving, we get slogans, we get commercials, we get lobbyists, we get endless polls, right? We get propaganda, right? So this economic or corporate approach to politics yields government that seeks to secure further economic gain as a recipe, right? And this recipe too frequently leads to militarism. And of course, Dewey is speaking, 10 years after the First World War. And so he saw how, these things can lead to war. Of course, led to war again. And he says, armies and navies exist to protect commerce, to make secure the control of raw materials, and to command markets. Men would not sacrifice their lives for the purpose of securing economic gain for a few, if the conditions presented themselves to their minds in this bald fashion. Right? But the balked demand for genuine cooperativeness and reciprocal solidarity in daily life finds an outlet in nationalistic sentiment. So I think that's an important point, that nationalism or pride in country can sometimes be motivated not by some pure love of community or love of neighbor, but by an organized effort by the economic forces of a country, speaking through the megaphone of government and the megaphone of advertising and the megaphone of business, right, to gin up nationalism and to sacrifice for gain, right, which will benefit private economic forces in society. Right? It's not like self-defense or something like that. Now, a word about religion, just briefly. Dewey also considers the role of religion in shoring up individuality. And in Dewey's view, sort of the bomb or the solution that religion might bring to the disintegration of individuality is not sufficient. In his view, religion can't be effectual given that the underlying social aspects are damaged, as we've been describing earlier, because the social bonds between church members, right, or synagogue members, or mosque members, right, they're the core of religion. But if those have been frayed by the economic and political forces in a society, religion can't simply repair the problem ad hoc. Right? If the problem is going on Monday through Saturday, it cannot just be repaired on Sunday, for example. So there are ineffectual solutions that proliferate, right, in this sphere. Extreme fundamentalism, occultism, right, or again in the New Age or right outside of traditional zones, sort of 12-step spiritualism. And as Dewey writes about these, the sense of wholeness which is urged as the essence of religion can be built up and sustained only through membership in a society which has attained a degree of unity. The attempt to cultivate it first in individuals and then extend it to form an organically unified society is fantasy. And there are other false remedies. Right? There's moral relativism. So return to virtue, right? The idea that we could just have family values again, or just say no, was a slogan which was tried out in the 1980s to try to deal with the problems with drug abuse, right? Just say no. This idea of reinvigorating the moral will leads to blaming the victim more than it does to solving the problems of deteriorating individualism. Legalistic technologies also can play a role, right? False promises to sort of pass new laws and 3 strikes laws and longer penalties and that kind of thing. So Again, why does Dewey think that these back to morals movements can't help? Right? Why can't we just insist that people just say no or have values or practice abstinence? Right? Well, from Dewey's perspective, such phenomena are really just symptoms of the problem, right? Each is an example, as he puts it, as a natural expression of a period in which changes in the structure of society have dissolved old bonds and allegiances. So if we're upset, for example, at the way sex is portrayed or practiced in society, whether that's rampant voyeurism or whether that's objectification, whether it's high divorce rates or whether it's earlier and earlier ages of experimentation, the solution is to reconsider longer-term adjustments of social forces. Censorship can't do it. Threats of punishment or punishment can't do it either. Rather, what's necessary is the reconceiving and the reconstruction of individualism. So, the last section, just very brief now, is to rethink individualism, right? For Dewey, rethinking individualism means an attempt to harmonize our actual ideals with our actual practices to make the changes we need. And this can begin by thinking about which beliefs dominate our thinking. Where did they come from? Why? Right? Why did they arise? Whose interests did they serve? What interests are they serving now? How are they being used, reflectively or more likely unreflectively today? And which elements of those beliefs might we keep and which might we modify or discard in order to enact a new form of individualism that's better suited to our needs and to the world as it actually exists around us. So this is the end then of this lecture on the lost individual. I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to talking with you about it.